Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a significant severe weather event that'll be taking place across parts of the United States today, where a moderate risk of severe weather has been issued for the threat of damaging winds as high as 100 miles per hour, large to very large hail, and perhaps an isolated tornado. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the southern plains, and there's already been actually a little line of storms that's been rolling through Oklahoma this morning. That's actually going to be going to Arkansas by the time this video is out, but there's a little area of storms that's been producing some damaging winds this morning, and honestly, this is just the prerequisite to what we're going to see later today in terms of a severe weather event across parts of the southern and central plains. Very dangerous severe weather day ahead for parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and as well as Nebraska. We'll be talking about more on that in just a moment. Further down to the south, we actually have a very well-defined ridge that is currently located back down near Mexico and Texas, and this essentially is keeping areas very dry and as well as much warmer, which is going to keep basically a heat dome down there in areas like Texas and as well as into Mexico. And what this will essentially do is bring record-breaking temperatures to some areas, and we will see temperatures as high as 115 to maybe even 120 degrees in some locations. So very dangerous heat is expected there. But one key thing that this is doing to the severe weather potential is it's actually wrapping around storms around it. So you'll notice that complex of storms back over in Oklahoma this morning, it's actually starting to drift from east to southeast, and that's because of that high pressure system kind of spinning it down almost to the southeast. We're going to notice that as well with today's severe weather event. The storms will begin east and then they'll start to drop a bit more down to the south and east. It's quite fascinating. I'll show you more on that in just a moment. And then before we show you the severe weather potential, last thing, back over on the east coast, lots of showers and storms are continuing. Low end chance for severe weather today. Not very concerning, but isolated hail and damaging winds possible. Very disorganized low pressure system, but there is an absolute mess of clouds and as well as showers and storms over there. So if you're over there, it's going to be very cloudy throughout the day today, especially back up into the northeast. All right, let's talk about the very concerning severe weather potential today. It's obviously much higher than what we've seen over the past couple of days. We now have a moderate risk of severe weather. This is going to include a very small area, but it is very notable. We are talking about areas in far northwestern Oklahoma, basically bordering Kansas, and as well as a few counties bordering Kansas and Oklahoma. There is going to be a few areas near like Dodge City, for example, that are included in this moderate risk of severe weather. You'll notice there's also an enhanced risk that goes from about southwest Kansas back into areas in northwest Arkansas, and let's not forget there's another enhanced risk back up in Nebraska and as well as South Dakota. And in addition to that, we have a slight risk that goes all the way back down through Mississippi, and that is because the storms that develop later today will basically take that path down to the south and east. I'll show you what that looks like on the future radar. It'll go towards areas like Louisiana and Mississippi overnight, so there could be a damaging wind threat there. Very concerning stuff, so make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts and you are weather aware today, because there will definitely be some significant storm activity. Damaging wind potential is the main concern. Again, I mentioned this already. Damaging winds up to 100 miles per hour is not impossible in this sort of setup. It's an isolated threat, but you want to make sure you are prepared for that sort of threat. That's like an EF1 tornado, by the way, if we were to see those high winds. But you'll notice that main concern right now is going to be across areas, again, in far northwestern Oklahoma and as well as southern parts of Kansas. There's a hatched area all the way until Arkansas that's going to include that potential for damaging winds upwards or if not exceeding 75 to 80 miles per hour. So, and with that being said, the flying trampoline meter is going to be at the highest that we've ever put it at the gone forever stage. You want to make sure you are protecting any flying trampolines, loose line items, umbrellas, any patio umbrellas. Make sure you take those down. Make sure again that you are prepared for today's severe weather potential. Hail threat as well is definitely there. It's going to mainly be out of those initial cells though that develop. So really during the early to mid afternoon, you'll notice the best chance is going to be back down in southwest Kansas. And again, we have another chance further to the north across areas in Nebraska and as well as southern South Dakota. Don't forget about that if you're in those areas. Large to very large hail is possible. This area in particular, the highest inch diameter I would expect today is around 3 to 3.5 inches. And then back down in southwest parts of Kansas, 3 inches as well. Probably going to be about the maximum hailstone diameter there. So make sure again that you are prepared. Bring your vehicles as well into your garage or cover them if you're able to. Tornado risk today is very low. It's not really that concerning, but with the damaging wind potential, it's almost going to act like as if it is a EF0, EF1 type tornado if we see those high damaging winds. So again, treat any storms that you see severe today as if it's a tornado warning. Pretend it is a tornado and make sure you get to your safe place away from windows and lowest floor possible, because damaging winds up to 100 miles per hour can really cause some serious damage, especially to like trees. They can knock over into homes and stuff like that, so make sure that you're prepared for that. Let's talk about that severe weather timing. Beginning with around lunchtime today, it will stay dry up until about 3 or 4 o'clock. That is when those initial supercells will start to form back over in southwest Kansas and southeast Colorado. Again, these will really quickly become severe, and they could produce really hefty downburst winds. Upwards of, again, 100 miles per hour is not out of the question out of these storms, as long as they do have all the ingredients in place, which at this current time, it does seem as if we're going to have all the ingredients in place for some really significant damaging winds. Once we go closer to around 6 o'clock or so, storms continue to march out to the east. Notice further up to the north, we do have a couple of other areas of storms that we have to watch for today. These are more going to be capable of large hail and damaging winds, maybe a brief tornado as well, but these will not be producing that damaging wind capacity up to 100 miles per hour. These will probably be closer to maybe up to 80, but it would probably stay under 80 miles per hour overall. Once we go closer to around 6 to 7, again, these storms move up to the east. By around 8, 9 o'clock, those storms are going to be really riding along the Oklahoma and Kansas border, so it's going to be a close call. Some computer models have hinted it's going to stay slightly further to the north, some slightly further to the south, but consistency has been there that these storms are really going to ride right in this area where that moderate risk of severe weather is. So make sure, again, you are staying weather aware today and have multiple ways to receive alerts, and also make sure you are protecting your flying trampolines. Once we go closer to the midnight hour, storms continue to march to the east and east-southeast, and then eventually going into the overnight hours, those storms start to move into Arkansas and Missouri. It might not look crazy, but that will still be producing the threat for damaging winds. If we look further here to the south, you'll notice that area of storms, as I mentioned at the top of this forecast, the high pressure system's essentially spinning storms almost to the east-southeast after a while. That's what's going to actually end up happening with these storms. They're going to start to drop down a bit more to the south and east, so they could impact areas in Arkansas, potentially Tennessee, and as well as maybe northern Missouri before that entire area starts to fizzle out. There might still be some gusty winds as we go into the morning hours on Wednesday, but again, the overall threat of severe weather will start to diminish really after about 3 or 4 in the morning, and that is when we'll still be seeing a little bit of isolated damaging winds, but most of it will just be strong storm activity by then. And by the way, there's another chance for severe weather tomorrow. It's not nearly as high at this current time, but it is going to include areas back over in the Midwest and as well as back down into areas like Mississippi. Now, keep in mind the area in Mississippi is primarily going to be for the storm activity that we see going into the morning hours tomorrow, so what I just showed you. And then back over the Midwest, we're watching for an afternoon and evening threat of some severe weather capable of some damaging winds, perhaps some large hail. Wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado either, but it should be a low threat overall. You'll notice as we go into the morning hours, there will be some showers, maybe a couple of storms, nothing too crazy. But once we go closer to the late afternoon hours, that is when we might start to see some storms fire up, and the ones that do could produce, again, some large hail and damaging winds. That'll really be mainly across areas in western Wisconsin by the afternoon. Closer to around 6 to 7 o'clock, storms continue. Another area that is a little bit of a sleeper right now is back down in central and southern Illinois. We could see a couple storms down there produce damaging winds and large hail, and eventually going closer to around midnight, storms will continue, but a lot of them will not be severe after midnight. So just make sure you're weather aware tomorrow and have multiple ways to receive alerts if you're in the Midwest. Again, before this forecast ends, make sure to have multiple ways to receive alerts today. If it's a weather radio or your phone, cannot stress that enough with severe weather really around the corner for a lot of areas in the southern and central plains.